Aloha, everyone. It is Tasha on Maui, and I'm so excited because today I actually have a guest. It's not just me going live. I have my friend Ellen, and Ellen is the producer of Beauty Bites Beast, among so many other things. Ellen, how are you today?
I'm great. It's beautiful here in Southern California. And I am enjoying looking out my window because I'm feeding birds and watching them wash themselves in my fountain. So life is good.
Awesome. So you have, I mean, you do so many different things, but you are the producer, writer, and author because you also have it as a book, Beauty Bites Beast. And can you share a little bit about your background and how this film and book came to be?
Oh, wow.
Loaded, right? Let's get into it.
Let's see, my background is that I grew up in South Dakota where even the criminals were nice. I mean, we were the only thing we were uh, uh, equipped with was nicing people to death. And
Nice.
the only tool we had, be nice, be nice, be nicer. And so when I moved to California, I soon discovered that nice was not enough. And
Hmm.
so I had my usual brushes with creeps and people who did not honor my
Oh,
boundaries.
oh, there's two. Oh, so let's see. Let me. Up, up, up. There we go. There's a little delay. Okay, keep going. I'm listening.
Okay, okay. So the incident that precipitated my writing Beauty Bites Beast was that I lived in a huge 5,000 square foot house in downtown LA, which was in a neighborhood that was very sketchy. And my husband and I had met in another part of town. And so we were in two separate cars and we arrived home at midnight. He drove his car in first. I followed him down the driveway. And all of a sudden, he stops the car and he comes over to my window and he says, "Stay in the car. Somebody's broken into the house." It's pitch black, midnight, Los Angeles, intense urban area.
Mm.
And I'm like, okay. And he's going to go inside this house. And I broke out of I don't know what I was doing, but I suddenly went, what kind of partner am I that I would allow my sweet husband to go into a dark house at midnight to confront a burglar? Really? So I think I'm liberated and I'm just letting him handle the hard stuff. Well, I wait in the car. No, that's not how I roll. So I decided I would follow him into the house. And if we had been thinking straight, we would have just gotten in the car and backed out and gone to a police station and, done it like sane people. But when people are under stress, they usually default to strict, rigid gender roles. And so that's what we did. And as I was crossing the threshold and ready to go into the house, a man in a ski mask
Mm.
comes up our basement stairs and he holds up a knife and he's ready to plunge it into me. And I froze. And then I screamed so loudly, I mean, loudly, that he dropped the knife, grabbed his ears, and ran like hell. And that was my first brush with stranger threats. Now, I had had dating situations and date rape and, you know, uh, non-stranger events that I had not defended myself, but there was no question that I had the right to defend myself with a stranger.
Hmm.
And that's what people are afraid of most of the time are strangers. But I had passed the California bar. I'm a licensed lawyer in California. I've never practiced because once I went through school, I went, yeah, this isn't for me. So I was a professional in the entertainment industry. And at the time, I was a segment producer for a talk show. And my husband, who had gone into the house before me, didn't know if he was going to find me dead or alive. It was such a blood curdling scream that all the apartment buildings, all the lights around us went on because they didn't know what was going down. And I was very, very much alive. I was experiencing one of those cortisol adrenaline dumps. So I was just like, I mean, just like shaking like this big.
Yeah.
um, and he said, my husband said, I'm going to give you a self-defense course for your birthday. And I'm like going, oh, great. Okay. And then I went into work the next day and I went around to everybody I worked with and I asked every single person, and we had about 40 people on staff. I asked every person, do you know how to defend yourself? Do you know how to defend yourself? Do you know how to defend yourself? And 100% of the men said, yeah, you know. Now, some of them were clearly lying. And I asked all the women, and they 100% said, God, no, I can't even believe you were able to scream. And so, being a curious person, in both the ways that I'm curious and people find me curious, I thought, wow, that's weird. How come, first of all, as a privileged white woman, nobody's ever said to me, now here's some things to know about violence. Not anybody, not a soul. Now, my parents, all they ever told me to do was to be nice, because their parents before them and their parents before them just said, be nice, be nice, be nice. And so I went, wow, that's really weird. So I started searching for a book that would explain that to me. It's like, why do we keep thinking that violence is not going to happen to us when clearly, statistically, yes, there's a very good chance it will. Why do we keep pretending it's not? What is up with that? So I looked, as I do, because I'm a voracious reader, to find a book that would explain it to me. Could not find one. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to have to write that book. So that's why I wrote Beauty Bites Beast.
Wow.
And you know, it's not a how-to book. I call it a how come book. How come we keep raising girls and women to think somebody's going to save them, or all men are going to behave themselves, when clearly these are myths. They're not, it's not true. You know, and
Yeah.
that women are weak and it's because we're smaller. Well, some of us are smaller, but we're not all smaller. I mean, it's just a lot of crap.
Well, yeah, and thank you for sharing your story. I mean, that's it's always takes me back, even though it's not shocking, just because I am aware of statistical data and I understand that, you know, everyone has their own unique story, and I think that it is very important to, you know, validate everybody's stories, acknowledge that they exist. I wish that people would have more open conversations like these to be able to share, so it's normalized to have open conversations, because I think we just silence ourselves so much. Um, you know, something that I noticed when you were talking about how you were able to yell and defend yourself against this unknown person, because that was okay. That was, you know, but when it was someone who you knew, I got the feeling that you were had this thought at the time, probably, that it wasn't okay to actually respond or defend yourself or speak back.
Not only was it not okay, it wasn't within my mindset or the palette of what's possible. It didn't
Mhm.
occur to me, oh, I could kick his ass. This was not even a remote possibility. The man who assaulted me was, oh God, at least a foot taller than me and outweighed me by 50 pounds. And I didn't regret doing what I did, because it just didn't occur to me that I could do anything but. So what I did is I complied, because he had gotten physical. He shoved me, and it's like, oh man, that kicked it into a whole nother level of force. If somebody's willing to shove you, they're willing to use other means of violence, right? So I succumbed, because I thought, you know what? I don't want to get raped and beaten up. So I'll just, you know, comply. And
Yeah. Well, and it's sad that that is, for so many women, that is the safe way to go. It is the safe way to be, and I think that so many women get blamed for taking that route when the fact is that that's survival kicking in. How can I make it through this? What is the best course of action? Well, this
absolutely.
is the best course of action, and just validating and understanding that that's where you were at that time. Um, you
And
know,
even now, because it's a myth that rapists only rape people within a certain age range, right? People
yeah.
go, oh well, she wasn't that pretty, or she wasn't this. Yeah, it's like, no, rapists are they don't select people based on their demographics.
I
They
mean, some do, but not everyone. Like
no,
the Green River Killer back from where I'm from, and where my it was around during my mom's time when she was a lot younger. She fit the same demographic, so it was being extra careful because she was a brunette, she was younger, she was in that age frame.
right.
But yeah, but understanding that this does happen to women of all different ages. I had a friend who was telling me of a problematic relationship that her grandparents had, and I was like, "Well, what do you mean problematic?" And it was like, "Well, he raped her for so many years," and I was like, "Oh, okay." And they and then they're still together, but she's just angry and she takes it out on him. And I'm like, this is, these are different things that happen that we don't have conversations about. These are
Exactly.
these are um, there's these ideas that when you get into a marriage or a relationship, you have to stick with it, and there's still that mentality. But if somebody is being abused, then they don't have to stay. There's
Oh.
so many other options, but just realizing that there's no one demographic that this hits everyone. So, any person, no matter what their gender, or no matter how they look, can be affected.
My sister, my late sister, she was um, 13, 14 years older than I am. She told me that her accountant um, threatened to um, turn her into the IRS on a trumped up thing if she wouldn't give him a blowjob. And she was so fearful that he would do that she did. And the shame she had, and I just said, you did what you needed to do. You couldn't handle an audit and the IRS coming after you on a trumped up charge. I mean, he was threatening to blackmail you over something he made up, and she could never get over feeling guilty that she complied. And it's like,
There's a lot of shame that goes into that. I think that this is part of the reason why I set up my Facebook group, is so that women have a support system, they have help, they have an avenue, so that they're not alone. And I think that it is really important that we honor each other and we honor each other's stories, because these stories, they matter. And just for her, if she had had that extra support of understanding that this has happened to so many different people in so many different ways, like, oh, do you want this job promotion? Here's a way, or different stuff like that. It happens all the time to women. So understanding, how to navigate that, I think, is so important. That's why I was so excited about having you on to just talk a little bit more about Beauty Bites Beast and all of the work that you're doing.
yeah, and I love your point about normalizing it as a conversation topic. I'm old enough to remember when um, you just never, ever talked about rape, which meant that when you're not talking about something, it doesn't get counted. And we didn't have any idea how many women actually had experienced violence from not only people they knew, but stranger violence, all the different types of assaults. And it was verboten, it was taboo. You just don't talk about that stuff. And as you mentioned, it's still like not brought up. You don't at a dinner party go, okay, so who's been assaulted?
Yeah. No,
But
yeah, I was just asked why I started my business. I was in a group with a whole bunch of different entrepreneurs this morning, and they were like, "Why did you start your business?" And I was like, "Oh, I had a stalker when I was 15 years old, and he used to follow me around, and I had to learn how to defend myself." And so it's just like crickets all across the room. And I was like, no, we're not going there. Can't have that conversation.
I'm curious because I, when I tour my book or I give speeches or screen Beauty Bites Beast, the documentary, I always have somebody come up, if not a line of people coming up to tell me their personal stories.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yes. Yeah. So that happens a lot with me, usually on private messenger. I get a lot of that. I had there's sort of a thing where people are doing a lot of business on private messenger, so I'm always very curious when people are contacting me. And this one lady just, kept on asking me all of these different questions about my work and everything else, and I'm like trying to figure out what she's getting at, like. What are you trying to sell me, woman? And so then she finally, I finally just said, hey, I really want to know how I can support you. Is there something that you wanted to ask me? Because you're asking me a lot of questions about my business right now, and I just don't really get it. And then she said, I'm just going to be very direct with you. I was raped in 2012. This is something that happened to me. I would like to have you come and talk to me for a session. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. I'm more than happy to do that. But even so, it took her so many different questions in order to feel comfortable bringing that story out, because you do have these people who years and years and years go by and you say nothing and it's just stuffed. So, what for you, how long did it take you to write your book?
oh dear, that's such a hard question to answer because I've been a columnist with the Pasadena Weekly and Huffington Post, et cetera, for a lot of years. And
What
my
column, what focus?
gender and
Gender.
politics
Okay.
and smartassery.
Great.
I'm a smart ass and proud of it. That's
Wonderful.
another thing that you're not supposed to be as a woman. You're not supposed to be a smart aleck. Um, oh, too bad I didn't get that memo. Um, and I found this book, which I still recommend. I don't think it's still in print, but it was an anthology of women who had successfully defended themselves, called
Oh,
Her Wits About Her.
oh,
And
cool.
it's like, I'm going, wow, really? And I read it, I could not put it down. And it was all these women and some kids that had defended themselves successfully against not only sexual assaults, but flat out not sexual assaults. And I'm like going, this is wow. So these stories have been suppressed in mainstream. Wow.
Yeah.
And how come? And that really fed a lot of what Beauty Bites Beast is. It's like, so women have been defending themselves for centuries and we don't know about it. Who benefits from keeping a whole group of people ignorant?
Mm-hmm.
Another way of saying
Absolutely.
that, another way of saying that is follow the money. So follow the power. Who gets power from keeping a whole group of people clueless?
Yeah.
Hmm?
Well, I mean, even if you look throughout history, who writes the stories? Most of the time, they would publish men's stories over women's stories, and there's a power play there. So just understanding that, even when it comes to like Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, a lot of their ideas actually came from the fact that they were dating the same woman, and she actually published some works as well. And so, a lot of people don't necessarily know that, but understanding that women have influenced history in so many different ways, despite the fact that they have this these forces working against them. It's very inspiring. It's very frustrating, and I think that because of our the different platforms and ways of communicating, now is a more optimal time for women to be able to share their stories in a healthy way. I know that for me, one of the biggest things for all of my social media is to normalize having some of these open conversations, just because of the different stuff that happens. Because how many times is for you as a woman in the in the talent industry, had to deal with some sort of lewd comments, or a touch in inappropriate touching, or different stuff like that at the workplace.
Well,
I'm
not only
guessing a
that,
lot.
the financial consequences of having white cis male writers writing about things that interested them, and women having very few parts other than being arm candy or flat out villains, and
Yeah,
just normal, interesting, intellectual, fascinating women were a non-existent.
yeah,
So for every, I mean, it's not easy being an actor. I'm also an actor, and it's not easy being a male actor in Hollywood, but it's really hard being a female actor in Hollywood because of the few parts
yeah,
that are created by writers that don't think about it as economic discrimination, but it is.
yeah, yeah. Well, and it's you're getting into a whole other realm that I think that it's really important to highlight is that there is an economic dynamic that actually does affect women, where there's this need to want to go mainstream so that it's easier for them to actually get money, get work, get jobs, and especially in the industry that you're in. um, I think that there's so many men out there who, maybe if they had actually had the experience of writers who had more of a mindset like yours, perhaps we would be raising our young boys differently. Perhaps they would have a different mindset where they wouldn't think that it was okay to say lewd things to women, they wouldn't think that no means yes, and it possibly the our world would be in a different place. I think that media plays a huge role,
Oh,
huge role. Yeah.
you know, um, oh, this is such a point of frustration for me. Um, there is a segregation of who reads what kind of literature, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. And you will rarely meet men who read gender types of nonfiction,
Hmm.
uh, which is like, they're the ones that need to be reading this because they are clueless and stay clueless, where a whole bunch of women for many, 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 many decades have been breaking down gender rigidity, gender bias, gender everything. And men don't have a clue about it because they think they know everything. That's a very big generalization because not all men are that way. And a lot of men are that way. They just don't think there's anything to learn because they know women. Well, no, not really. They have these stereotypes embedded in them. And it's not even a personal flaw, it's culturally embedded in them about how a woman is supposed to be. And,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah, I mean, and I know this even from my personal relationship. I have a very loving relationship with my partner, and we've been together for over 7 years. But there are certain things that he'd say, and I'm just like, "Wow, where did you learn that?" And so then I would have to say how I felt and educate him on my views and be able to have him see this other view. And I know that it's been this ongoing learning process for each of us, but definitely within the last 3 years of our relationship, it's been really amazing to see the changes in communication, in our roles within the household, just because I think that there's so many different things that happen when it comes to gender roles that are very disempowering for women that we don't even really think about. It's like, yeah, I know that for the most part, women tend to clean the house or they tend to make the meals, but where did all that come from? And so, me challenging the status quo in my relationship has definitely helped our relationship to become way stronger. But just what you're talking about, where did all of that come from? Where was the root cause? So I think that it's wonderful that you're doing all of that. Can you talk a little bit more about Beauty Bites Beast, just so that people have a better understanding of it? And I am going to put the link inside the description
you
after we do
mean
this.
Beauty Bites Beast, the documentary?
Yes, both the documentary and the book. I want people to learn about both.
Yes, well, the documentary, speaking of men not being aware of gender and how it impacts them and women, or however one identifies with fluid gender identity. Every time so far a man in any kind of position of influence has read Beauty Bites Beast, you can hear their head go. And I was on a trip to Mexico, and my seatmate in the bus, so there were only 13 of us, and we just got along so well. It's like if I'd had a brother, he would have been my brother. And I said, okay, I have a challenge for you, and that is I want you to read my book when we get back to the United States. And he said, okay, I will. And after he read my book, he emailed me and he said, I had no idea how scary it must be to be a female out in the world. I really, it's not that I don't care. It just never occurred to me. I'm tall, I'm blonde, I'm European, and nobody ever messes with me when I'm out and about. They just don't.
Yeah.
And I'm like going, yeah, yeah. And he said, and I didn't tell you this when we were in Mexico, but I own a factory in Tijuana, which is one of the border towns. And he said, I'd really like you to come down and train the women um, who work for me, because I can see now after reading Beauty Bites Beast that they're afraid of me. I couldn't figure out, why would they be afraid of me? I'm a sweet man, and they are afraid of me, and that is really alarming to me. So long story short, we ended up taking a crew of impact personal safety instructors and a few from Ohio and other freelancers. And we went down and we did the same kind of impact class that we would do for white suburban soccer moms, and which meant we did it once a week instead of a collapsed, concentrated course. And of course, these women responded just the way other women all over the world responded, which is they were empowered, they were blown away, and just would not put up with shit they've been putting up with all these years after they took the class.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was astonishing, but predictable. We knew we knew that they would walk in one way and walk out another, which is why I keep doing this work. So when I said, yes, I'll come down, I'll create the team to come down and do that. And thank God, Lisa Gata, who is not only a dear friend, but my writing partner for the other book we wrote called The Safety Godmothers, um, it was mind-boggling, the changes right before our very eyes. We cannot stop doing this.
Yeah.
It's like having a vaccination for the pandemic of violence, and we have our hands on it, and we want to give it away. We want to give it away, but we can't live unless we find a way to have it support us, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So,
And so anyway, I forgot the main point of that is that I said, okay, if we're going to come down and train your employees, I need to get permission to tape it so that we can create a documentary about it. And he
oh,
said,
cool.
sure. So that was the kernel that started the documentary.
Very,
A
very
long
cool.
answer.
No, no, it's great. I love these. I love long answers because they share so much more in depth about what the question was. Something that I was just thinking is you were saying that they responded the same way that a lot of soccer moms did, but I also know that just especially because of what's going on right now in our nation, there's a lot that's going on when it comes to BIPAC violence that's happening that doesn't necessarily address all key areas for empowerment self-defense. It has to be catered. So how did you cater to a whole other culture and a whole other demographic geographical location? You
Well,
had Spanish speakers or different stuff like that?
yes, we had well, we did a whole bunch of things to take care of our students. We had translators, we had bicultural therapists standing by,
That's wonderful.
because I had done pre-interviews, and 100%, Tasha, 100% of the people who signed up for our class had experienced violence.
Mm.
100%. Oh, did I mention 100%?
Yeah. So it's staggering, and I think a lot of it we don't necessarily associate with violence, and it is, like somebody verbally yelling and screaming at you or different stuff like that. Just because they didn't hit you,
Yeah.
they won't consider that violence. But
Yeah.
I've had so many clients that I've worked with where um, they they just come in, their shoulders are hunched forward, their heads down, and they're in sort of a fetal position, and they're talking to me, and they're like, he's never hit me, or something along those lines. But just listening to the communication styles and the way that things are directed, I think that a lot of the women in this industry, myself included as a survivor, have experienced these different cultural norms and gender norms that we won't associate it with violence, but it really is.
Oh, absolutely. Now, that said about what we did to provide for the different culture
Yeah.
needs, um, most border towns, whether it's Mexico or borders other places, they are dominated by the U.S. culture. So they're used to United States television. They're used to um, American idioms, and so we're,
So
we're
that was working in your favor.
well, yes, because I consider our cultural to be a colonization too, because we export violence in our movies, we export dismissiveness toward women in our movies. There's a lot of colonization that goes along with entertainment. Well, entertaining to whom? That's what I ask.
Yeah, yeah. And there was gosh, so one of my friends who went to one of Tony Robbins' old sessions a long time ago, and it was a really long time ago. So I believe that he has actually changed his verbiage and everything else. But something that was said was that he truly believed that all women fantasized about being gang raped.
Mhm.
and just understanding that it's like, wow, that's possibly more your fantasy, not necessarily women.
Uh, projecting much, oh, Mr. Robbins?
Yeah. So yeah, that's and I do hope that that's he's changed. I haven't I've seen some of his work, and it seems very inspiring, but it is so important to re-educate um men in these industries that are focused on wellness, to be able to have an understanding when it comes to gender-based roles and ideals and ideologies for women. I know that I was just recently having a conversation with someone where I was sharing different information about stuff that's happened with me and men, and I've had private messages from male instructors, male martial artists saying thank you. Like, I never knew that that was a thing. So thank you for sharing. And that's nice because it used to be the, hey, if I was there, who do you think would win in a fight? So I do see some changes happening in positive ways, but I do think that it has to do with education. We have to be vigilant about it, um, be vocal, but in a certain way that's also palatable. And that's like a whole other thing. And I know that you know that from writing and being in that industry.
Well,
Um,
we do around the house here, we do when we, before the pandemic, when we actually used to have dinner parties, we would mess with people by putting me at the head of the table
okay.
and my husband at the side, because there's
Nice.
this really strong, rigid, like the man sits at the head of the table. Well, who said? Well, okay, the etiquette books of hundreds of years ago, yeah, but and so I could see people kind of going, well, is Ken gonna sit there? I was like, nope, I sit here. It's like,
That's awesome.
you know,
Yeah. So, when it comes to your work, you have Beauty Bites Beast, you have the film, you have your book. What are you working on now?
I've been working forever on launching my online writing courses.
Cool.
Yeah, it's almost ready. It's called Author Bite by Bite. And I use author in the largest sense, which is if you write an essay, you're an author of that essay. I don't want people to feel like they only have to write books around me. That's not so at all.
Hmm.
But anyway, so I'm excited about it. It's about ready to go. And
Okay.
yeah, and I
Very
have,
cool.
yeah, yeah.
Awesome. So, there's that. How can people find you?
Well, if you Google my last name, just my name, you'll get hundreds and hundreds of hits. But um, go to author bite by bite
Okay.
or beautybitesbeast.com.
Okay.
And you can find me in a lot of different places.
Perfect. And we will have beautybitesbeast.com on the description for this so that people can find you there.
Yeah,
One last question. Thank you so
yeah.
much for staying in this. As far as your younger self, if you could have one piece of advice for your younger self in relation to the topics that we have been discussing, what would that be?
Um, well, I don't really live a life of regret. That's like kind of a waste of time in a lot of ways, or a waste of energy.
Mhm.
And that said, I think I would take my younger self aside and go, just because he's into you physically doesn't mean it's good for you, because I never considered myself to be attractive. So if a man paid attention to me, I was like, oh, and it's like, God. And I had been so inappropriately with men sexually. And then um, I didn't know about oxytocin, that
Oh,
if you are sexually involved with somebody, you're going to bond with them. And that was behind me bonding with some really, really bad people for me.
yeah.
They weren't bad people per se, but they were terrible for me.
Yeah.
Because my oxytocin, my chromosomes or my genomes or whatever were like going, whoa, whoa, that guy. And it's like, yeah, we would have made really pretty babies, but nope, not good. And I never wanted children. So, that was a really, so I would say, younger Ellen, just because you're sexually attracted to somebody doesn't mean you need to go sleep with them.
Yeah. No, well, thank you for that piece of advice. Thank you for coming on. I'm so grateful to just know you, and I look forward to having you on again, maybe after your course is launched. I'd love to hear more about how that's going.
Great,
All
great.
right.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy that we've been getting to know each other, Tasha. You're fabulous.
Thank you. Likewise. I love being around fabulous women.
Yes, me too. Me too.
Yeah. Well, you have a good one. Thank you so much. And we are signing off on Facebook. And we are signing off on here.